Hello again, YouTube. Someone's dad here. I was just watching a movie, finished watching it, Pressure. It's a movie about D-Day and about an often overlooked aspect of D-Day, which was the weather and whether or not they would go. I've watched, I think, every movie about D-Day. Including the one with John Wayne, where he wasn't there. He wasn't actually there. I don't know how many movies actually have people who were there in them, but D-Day is one of those once in century plus occurrences where American, British, Canadian, possibly Free French forces invaded France in the largest amphibious invasion in human history to free Europe from the Nazis. Like I said, I've watched them all. In 1998, our coach in high school, our football coach, took the team to see Saving Private Ryan. And I've watched Band of Brothers dozens of times. I owned it on DVD from 2004 on and watched it on HBO. World War II was one of those things for my generation where it was for some of us it was our grandparents and others our great-grandparents, or it was basically almost our grandparents' generation. My granddad was too young. He was only 9 years old when the war started, but his brother Edward was old enough to go fight, and he fought in New Guinea as a machine gunner. My granddaddy was the baby of 11, so it's not surprising that he was too young. But I had another granddad, my step-granddad, who was a bomber pilot in World War II, and he flew 43 missions over occupied Europe. And I grew up going to bomb group reunions and stuff and being around that all the time. And so we knew that the scourge of the world for the first half of the 20th century was Nazism. But I think about all the media representations of D-Day and also the books I've read by men who wrote about the bombing campaign, who were in it. One thing that's oddly missing, and I say oddly because you would think it would be there, but it's not, is machismo and male chauvinism. But it's not there. It's not in the fictional accounts. It's not in the real accounts. If anything, you get a sort of American 20th century stoicism. And I don't mean whatever the kids are talking about stoicism being nowadays. I mean, back then it was just a question of this is what we have to do. And I don't think they wanted to. There was a lot of bravado among the youth, but I think among the men who were there, they didn't want to be there. They had to be there. And that's different. That's the dreadful algebra of necessity. That's not pride, and it's not the portrayal of overt enthusiastic maleness. It's not Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, and it's not John Wayne from many of his films. Not all of them. As he got older, John Wayne got really introspective in a good way that I hope bodes well for his soul, as it were. But Saving Private Ryan, every time someone expresses some sentiment of, we need to do this or we need to do that because that's, what we're Rangers lead the way, whatever. More intelligent heads prevail. Same thing in Band of Brothers, and same thing in real life small infantry tactics. Now, there's a lot to be said for aggression in warfare. If warfare is purely defensive, you lose, generally speaking. Aggression wins the fight, but that's only in a purely a philosophical sense. From a tactical sense, good tactics win the fight. Resorting to your training wins the fight. What do you do when you're ambushed? You attack the ambush. You ambush the ambush. What do you do when your convoy, your second to last vehicle's hit? There's a lot of options, but you circle the wagons and you protect those who have already been attacked, and you don't leave them behind. You don't just take off going, because there's probably another ID right up ahead and it's going to knock out your lead vehicle, and then the whole friggin' convoy is stuck between front and back. So, like there was the principle for trying to identify IEDs of 5, 15, 25 meters. You're keeping your eyes at 5, 15, 25 over and over again as you scan, looking for potential threats. And tactics win. This is one of the key principles of the United States military that is not Viking tactics. It's not, all the crap that goes into Call of Duty. It's real. It's about knowing things and knowing what to do when you encounter certain things, not how much of a man you are. And we see that throughout these films portraying real events where it was not solely aggression that won the day. It was a combination of training and effective deployment of tactics, combined with an overall strategy that was meant to account for variables that didn't necessarily have anything to do with the individual soldier in a real sense, but overall had an effect that, it's the difference between Pete Hegseth and Dwight Eisenhower. Okay? Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense. He's not the Secretary of War. You don't get to just decide to call yourself the Secretary of War. That's nonsense. Just like I don't get to call myself coolest bro dude man on earth. I can do that, but it doesn't make it true. But Hegseth was not a general, firstly. Eisenhower understood something that Burnham Montgomery, who was the British High Commander, and that even the generals below Eisenhower, like Omar Bradley, and certainly Douglas MacArthur, who was quite the peacock, never understood. Eisenhower had a respect for the moment in history in which he lived, and knowing that if he failed, humanity failed, that the world would fail, that everything that he believed to be true would fail if he did not know with absolute gravity and the weight of humanity and history on his shoulders that he was doing the right thing. What does that have to do with what I talk about? Well, we have a choice whether to neglect and ignore half of the human population and to oppress and actively suppress half of the human population, or to embrace them. And I don't mean embrace them, I mean embrace them philosophically, in good faith, intellectually, honestly, and with the knowledge and understanding that they are us with different sex organs, with a slightly different appearance based on the culture in which they're raised, and that they are the other side of humanity, the other half, that thousands of years of human tradition and nonsense has told us to treat differently. And that's simply not accurate anatomically or philosophically. So like Dwight Eisenhower, like Abraham Lincoln, really, we are faced with a choice every day of how we look at the other side of our nature, the other side of mankind. The word that, if we're going to look at the roots of patriarchy in Western modern society, the word that means man from the Old Testament is Adam, or Adam. But Adam doesn't just mean man, as in a male. It means humanity, mankind. Now, Eve, it's become really trendy, especially among the trad wives and so forth, to define what Eve means. And the word Eve is often oversimplified to, well, in the classic sense, helpmeet. That's not accurate. Then it's reduced back to the Hebrew, which is Azer, and then people say, well, what does Azer mean in English? And often it's settled upon the phrase rescue, or the word rescue. What it actually means is not helpmeet. It's not somebody to just do the job, the work that God gave Adam. And it's not purely rescue in the sense of Eve is Adam's salvation. Man, I got some crazy bags going. Must be sleepy. And old. I mean, it's welcome to the future, boys. Eve was not one of any of those things. God looked upon man and saw that he was lonely, and he provided Eve. But what is vitally important for any man to understand is that God is not obliged in any way to give you an Eve as such. God doesn't have to provide you a rescue or a helpmeet. God provided one to Adam. There's a lot of implications and channels and pathways and rabbit holes you could go down with that, but are you even doing the work that might cause you to need this helpmeet, or are you just, out here demanding a helpmeet? Adam didn't go before God and say, God, it's too much. Give me a helper. Give me a rescue. Give me a haven. God looked upon it and saw it. And so he provided that. He wasn't obliged to. He didn't have to give Adam or anybody else, that rescue or that azer. It's a blessing. Doesn't mean it's a blessing that you get to look at and demand privilege from. Doesn't mean it's a blessing that you get to command and demand loyalty from. It's a blessing that is bestowed. And if you don't receive it, that doesn't mean that you've failed, but it also doesn't mean that you are owed it. You don't get to hold it against women, other men, or God that you don't have a woman. That's insane. You don't get to demand a woman. When God created the woman, he created another half of humanity, alike in all aspects to the first human. What's that have to do with Saving Private Ryan and D-Day? Well, when we look at all of these depictions, we see man in that state in which Adam found himself. We see Adam in every soldier who is out there despairing that he will never reach home, that he will never accomplish his mission. And God takes pity on that. Doesn't mean God's going to give anybody a woman. I mean, when God, quote unquote, gave Eve to Adam, it was not giving. It wasn't like, here you go, here's a servant. Adam, through his work, earned the opportunity to have help in like kind to himself. He had the opportunity to spend his 900 odd years, 700 years, whatever it was for Adam, in the company of another one like him. And he wasn't owed it, but God offered it. God created again. That seems to be the thing we lose. We lean into it as if women were made for men. Women were made by God. If you are a faithful religious person, maybe you're not. That's okay. But if you are, Eve was made. She wasn't made to be A, B, C, or D. She was made. And Adam could have ruined all of that. Adam could have done things that were contradictory to the will of God regarding how he wished his new creation to be with his first creation. Man finds himself fighting other men for any number of things on earth. But in the case of World War II, we were fighting for humanity. I knew Holocaust survivors when I was a kid. And I knew people who fought the Nazis. We probably don't lean into World War II the way we did 30 years ago, because all of those people were still, a lot of them were still around. But it was a struggle that cost more lives across every continent, every inhabited continent, than anything in human history. And it wasn't done for land, and it wasn't done for glory. It was done because the only other option was death. we face a similar choice. Do we struggle for humanity the way people 80 years ago did? Or do we simply say, well, that's women for you, that's liberalism for you, that's the woke crowd for you. Your ancestors and mine were woke in that they believed that if by taking up arms they could stop the extermination of a people or the liberation, they could bring about the liberation of an enslaved people, they would do it. So, if you're out here trying to reinforce a 1950s false narrative of what a family is supposed to be or who is supposed to do what and run what, you're not only on the wrong side of history, you're just living some fairy tale that's never been true except for like a tiny little portion of the population. I don't know what my great uncle Edward believed. Never met him. He died before I was born. I've been to his house. But he signed up to defeat and fight against forces that would have overthrown centuries of liberation initiated by a combination of Christianity, Western philosophy, and we ain't going back. That's all I can say. It's not a fair comparison, but I think of Omaha Beach, and I've watched many depictions and real camera footage of Omaha Beach, and the only option, Omaha, Utah, Juneau, the only option was to go forward, press on, push forward, hold the line and push. And that's where we are when it comes to men, women, the rights of every autonomous human being. Press on. Never stop pushing. That is the only option. And if you're in the way, well, best of luck. We ain't stopping. We're coming. As I put in my tags often, we out here. That's the only way. It's the only way forward. Forward is the only way. My basic training squadron, 321st Training Squadron, Lackland Air Force Base, the motto was lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. And that's all there is to it. You ain't got to lead. You ain't got to follow. But if you ain't doing one or the other, we're coming over you. All right. Reckon that'll do.